Sir, diplomatic overtures between the United States and Cuba, they have dominated headlines leading up to this summit. Will those overtures be enough to open up lines of communication between the U.S. and other countries in the region?
I think the process of dialogue that's underway between U.S. and Cuba is leading to all kinds of positive results for the United States going into this summit. I think President Obama arrives in Panama with a lot of wind on his back, not only because of the gesture toward Cuba, but also in terms of the breakthrough with Iran and a demonstration to the rest of the region and the world that this president is going to lead boldly through presidential diplomacy and try to turn the page from some of the past problems we've had to a new policy of engagement and partnership. And those are the kinds of themes that are really important for this region.
Mr. Piccone, as my colleague Peter Cook just mentioned, there have been reports that President Obama may soon remove Cuba from that U.S. list of state sponsors of terrorism. What message would this send to American businesses? They have watched for decades as their international competitors have accessed a market of over 11 million people.
Well, it certainly has a symbolic impact to reassure, in particular, the financial community that Cuba is no longer on this list and the red flags will no longer be raised every time they want to look at doing a finance deal in Cuba with a third party, of course. But practically speaking, it won't have that much effect because we still have a very comprehensive embargo in effect on Cuba, and Congress holds the reins on that issue. So in terms of U.S. businesses being suddenly able to do new business in Cuba, we're not going to see that other than the exceptions to the embargo that we already know about in areas of food and agriculture, in medical products and telecommunications.
I'm speaking with Ted Piccone, a senior fellow for the foreign policy program at Brookings. Mr. Piccone, last month, the United States expanded sanctions against Venezuelan officials for alleged human rights violations. Does this threaten to overshadow the summit?
I think it created a problem that probably wasn't necessary in terms of the timing of this decision. I mean, it was not a surprise that the U.S. administration was going to move in this direction. Congress had pretty much mandated it. But the timing was unusual given the goodwill that was generated by the December 17th announcements on Cuba. This brought back some of the old memories of U.S. intervention and coercive sanctions, even though the sanctions themselves are very minor in the case of Venezuela. So I think in the last couple of days, we've seen the administration respond very quickly with not only the hints that they'll lift Cuba off the terrorism list, but also an important visit by a senior envoy from the State Department to Caracas to meet with President Maduro of Venezuela to try to smooth over some of the problems that they've had. I think President Maduro will show up in Panama and he'll still make a fuss. He will make his point. He'll have petitions in hand demanding the lifting of these small sanctions. It'll be a theater, as these things tend to be. But I think overall, the general mood will be a positive one for President Obama.
Mr. Piccone, we have about a minute left. The Chinese have invested heavily in the region, especially in the Caribbean. Is that why President Obama stopped in Jamaica on his way to the summit, because China has established such a strong foothold?
I don't see it so much directed at China, although it's true that China has become much more of a player, not just in the Caribbean, of course, but mostly in South America, in Brazil, in Chile, in Peru, and in Venezuela, of course, where it receives much of its oil. But I think it's more about Venezuela, because the Caribbean countries have very reliant on subsidies from Venezuela for its energy imports. And the idea is to promote U.S. energy exports, and we're in a much better position to do that now. And also the idea of clean energy. I mean, Secretary Kerry is going to Panama with a strong climate change agenda in his hand as well. And so we'll see more of that in the coming days.